Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast, brought to you by Platform 195. We share trends and strategies across retail media to help you accelerate your brand growth. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson. Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson, founder and CEO of Platform 195. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Luis Pedro Martinez, the head of e-commerce for EssenceMediacom. With over 15 years of experience in the tech and online media industry, Luis is a seasoned leader known for his strategic vision and expertise in driving growth across key marketplaces like Amazon, Walmart, and beyond. His passion for mentoring young professionals and commitment to empowering diverse talent underscores his dedication to making a positive impact both personally and professionally. Join us as we delve into the world of retail media with Luis, exploring the evolving landscape of omnichannel measurement and uncovering insights that will shape the future of the industry. Welcome to the show, Luis.
Thank you, Stuart. A pleasure being here.
Look, it's been quite an interesting journey for you. Obviously, we've talked about Amazon and Walmart in there. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you've done?
Sure thing. So I recently joined EssenceMediacom here in the UK, overseeing their e-commerce practice. So very exciting times. Not a lot to talk about right now about that because it's fairly recent. But I'll be basically helping them accelerate their e-commerce services and consultancy and retail media strategies, as well as developing their ecosystem. In that sense, it's very similar, I guess, to what I've been doing in the past 5 years here in the UK. In the past 3 years, I worked for Jellyfish. And basically, I was tasked to take a lot of companies will have considered a Google-only shop, basically to becoming one of the largest independent agency partners here on e-commerce with the likes of Amazon, Criteo, CitrusHat, etc. So focus in two areas. One is to really develop the ecosystem of partners, basically to work with and enable e-commerce. And the other one is developing all the offers and that Jellyfish had basically around e-commerce that went from media consultancy to activation. And I think what's kind of like the hot topic for this year, everything that has to do with omnichannel and measurement. Prior to that, so I was working for Amazon here in the UK, leading the Big Six network agency partnerships for, at the time, what was basically search, Amazon Search or sponsor ad. So basically got shipped from the US, landed, and I had to figure out how to develop those partnerships with the network agencies here. 5 years ago, the landscape was very different, as you probably know, from what it is like today. Well, I mean, we're still in early days, but really, my work was all about getting the client and the partners excited about Amazon as a publisher, right? Today, it's more common to think about it that way. But 5 years ago, people knew that there was something happening, but they couldn't really put a finger on it around the power of retail media. And, prior to that, basically whole professional life back in the US where I worked for Bing, managing technology tool providers like Sky or Kensho at the time, Marine Software, and those guys. So I've been in, the digital world for a while at this point.
So in that Amazon world, tell us about that role at that time. You sort of touched on the fact it was some search ads. Did you see it evolve over that period?
Yeah. So during that time at Amazon, it was really cool because if I do a compare and contrast, when I had to basically quote unquote sell Bing and sell the dream of Bing in Europe, it was a little complicated, right? Because, as you know, Google is the heavyweight worldwide and Microsoft has done tremendous work in gaining market share, but still is distant number 2. With Amazon, it's different. Everybody wanted to work with Amazon, right? But I don't think Amazon knew how to work with agencies, partners at the time or their ecosystem because it was all brand new, came from a very retail focused world. Advertising was something that was not even discussed necessarily as it is today in their financials. So it was a really interesting world because there was a lot of willingness from agencies to figure out ways to work with Amazon. At the same time, I think Amazon had to learn how to work with those partners, right? So it was very interesting. I didn't have to sell the dream of working with Amazon, but I really had to figure out the best ways to do that. And that included things like education, like of the teams, like for them to understand the product, the offerings, what was in there. For agencies, a lot of that also had to do with financial models and business models, right? Because, you come from the same world, that left pocket, right pocket is not interesting, right? It's about maximizing, driving incrementality, that kind of thing. And I think then there's a lot of opportunity also around proof points, case studies, things that will really kind of define what the opportunity was on Amazon at the time. I think that for better or for worse during the pandemic, things accelerated considerably. And, one of the big winners was e-commerce during that time in terms of growth because of the confinements. But that all the negative things set aside from that period of time, it was a big accelerator for everybody doing e-commerce. The world basically became digital, right? And we had to grow and learn and adapt very quickly to that new digital interaction versus the physical one. So if I were to summarize my time at Amazon, I think the first year was all about training, basically getting people excited, getting them to know the platforms. The second year was all about growth. And really, once we set those foundations, it was really about like understanding how you drove incrementality for the brands and the benefits, right? So they would basically understand how to go beyond just trade budgets to really think about things like brand and the impact of what can Amazon do for my brand. And last but not least, I guess the last piece was about acceleration. So the last year I was at Amazon was really about helping what we call the e-commerce acceleration program. So really there's retail in retail media. And I always say that, right? Like a lot of it, as you probably know, is a lot of common sense, right? But, if you don't have inventory, sometimes you cannot advertise. I bring it down to that very simple explanation that I think makes a lot of sense for people. If you have bad reviews, people won't buy your products, right? So you need to ensure that those things are fine tuned, right? And it takes a little bit of time. It's not rocket science, but it takes some time for people to get used to those concepts, especially, if you come from a world that, it's all about just keywords and the sort of the right targeting strategy. You need that. But in addition to that, you need the retail sauce in order for things to really work.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, it's quite a good analogy for how you actually build a retail media business within the retailer is that education piece and the belief, getting the belief and the stakeholders aligned and agreed, and then demonstrating some success and then growing that. And then once you've got that belief and shown that there's some success and got some growth, then it's really how do you accelerate it? How do you then scale to create significant revenues, having got that sort of buy-in?
It's about building trust at the end of the day, right? I think to me, it's the thing about retail media or retail or e-commerce. It's about that connection with the consumer. It's that digital connection at the end of the day. If you look at what's happening in the industry now, and, I wrote a little piece on LinkedIn last week about retail media in the UK, but this idea of being the connected consumer, of understanding the customer journey, of building that trust. It's really cool, right? It's very like retail has existed forever, right? Like, you go back to the fishmonger in medieval times and even probably before that, right? To high streets and those things. But it's always about that connection and creating sort of this special experience for your consumers, right? That goes beyond search, beyond targeting audiences. And I think that's what's really cool about this industry, that we're leveraging now the power of that data to create those connections. And that 5 years ago was basically a dream, right? Like I remember 5 years ago or plus at this time, I was at an offsite in Barcelona and it was the first time we talked about marketing cloud at Amazon. Imagine that, right? And where we are today.
So, amazing. You talked about the high street there, and obviously we're evolving so quickly as an industry now. You talked a bit about Omnichannel earlier. Mm-hmm. What does Omnichannel mean to you?
So that's a very interesting question. I think that someone who defines retail media as just being mid to lower funnel, right? Like for me, retail media is the power of that data. And in a way, that retail data is what feeds Omnichannel. Now, Omnichannel, I guess, depends on your client or your brand and their objectives. But for me, it's basically anything that touches the funnel from, your brand budgets all the way to conversions, right? And the data that powers that and the technology that goes through that. So for some clients, out of home might not necessarily be a play, but for other clients, it's part of a very specific thing, especially on grocery and things like that. So for me, it's any sort of interaction that you can potentially measure for your customer, right? If you're a brand, if you basically are able to measure and have reach on that channel, I would consider that part of Omnichannel. When I was at Jellyfish, Omnichannel, in the terms that we were talking to our retail clients, it was very digital. It was all about bringing your Google, your Facebook, your digital channels together. But if you think about someone, let's say Sony, right? Like omnichannel can also means offline sales or brick and mortar, that kind of thing, depending on where you are. But I mean, basically, as the definition says, it's anything basically that is omnipresent on your brand experience. And the key for me is how you measure it, how you send the right message at the right time to the right audience, and how you potentially monetize that or have a specific KPI on that interaction.
And has your work at Jellyfish largely been on the brand side then, helping brands like Sony, for example, capitalize on retail media? Or have you worked more with the retailers? What's been the balance?
So in my experience, it has been more around helping brands basically be present on the specific marketplaces and understanding the strategy of those marketplaces. So the nature of the digital world, the retail media, as you probably know, a big chunk of that has always been Amazon. So really helped that I came from that world and I understood sort of the structure of Amazon, their goals, their product, their offerings, because I could take that information, basically tailor a solution. You know, I would work with what we call retail consultants that will help answer the question of what product should I have on Amazon and why, what sourcing models, right? Rinse and repeat with other retailers out there. You know, for instance, we work with a large beauty brand that Amazon was significant in Germany, but so was other retailers. So we work a lot with those guys and therefore understanding the platforms that power those networks, such as Criteo, for instance. But it was about understanding the category dynamics, what was going on within those categories, understanding what consumers were looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And then you translate that into a very simplistic way, the list of products you want to sell, the SKUs or ASINs, whatever you want to call them. And then you need to translate that into a media strategy, media investment strategy, right? Across the funnel. So that being, you know, things like ad products that you want to use, budgets that you want to use, testing that you want to do, that kind of thing. But where it becomes interesting to me as well is the power of the data, because we were doing very cool stuff with certain, what is called non-endemic. So things that you wouldn't traditionally buy, let's say on Amazon, like you don't buy credit cards, but you can definitely, you know, if you are on Amazon, you might see every now and then something that says that if you apply for this product, you might get a voucher of a discount. And that might be a credit card, you know, and it's the power of that data, or financial services, automotive, that kind of stuff. So again, like this is for me, the definition of omnichannel retail media goes, you know, it's not confined to a potential transaction, but it's more about the power of that audience and the insight that you get.
Yeah. And are the retailers geared up to helping you with that data? Have you seen that there's probably some willingness, but are they actually geared up to help you in that scenario?
That's a very good question. I think we are in, I wouldn't say the tipping point because that would be too probably far-fetched to say at this point, but we're definitely going through change management. What I mean by that is that it's funny because, you know, a lot of people will complain, or when I work at Amazon, a lot of my agency partners will basically highlight how Amazon had very limited data compared to other platforms. And now Amazon is a little bit the standard when it comes to retail media on the data availability, because as you probably know, it's very fragmented. It's a little bit of the Wild West out there, right? Like in terms of what's available or not. So I think there's different levels of data sharing or willingness to provide that data. I think it's very limited. I think it's a learning curve. You know, a lot of companies out there are doing fantastic things. I think Boots is a perfect example of, or Walmart for that matter in the US. They're either taking Amazon as a footprint and emulating similar sort of data availability or ad format, but not everybody's there, right? So, you know, I think if you look, for instance, in France, Carrefour was kind of sort of this big excitement about a year ago, and we haven't seen too much progress in terms of what's out there or not out there. There was a very good article about the frustration of not having that data. So to answer your question, it depends on the publisher or it depends on the retail media network, to be specific. Ideally, what will happen is that as people start seeing those benefits, they will start to open up more. And I think, in my opinion, it will only take one big retailer or one big grocer to just expose a little bit more of data that obviously safe and falls within parameters of confidentiality and safety and all those things, GDPR. But the point is that if someone starts doing that, a lot of people will flock to that data, and I think people will follow.
Yeah. In terms of the planning side, then, were you finding that actually most retailers would say, we'll plan the campaign for you, and then they put together the plan, they give it back to you as a brand, as an agency? How much are you able to actually do the physical planning as an agency when it comes to retail media?
So I would so much prefer the latter that you mentioned, meaning that was our goal at Jellyfish, or I believe it's the goal at Jellyfish. And certainly something I would push for is that the higher agency service, we should be able to do that, have the experts, right? I mean, that's the whole point of having retail media experts, to understand and work with media strategists, work with media planners, to really come up with a comprehensive budget. In our case, or in my experience, it's always been us, the ones driving as much as possible, because our clients will be going back to the point of being omnichannel. A lot of our clients will also be working on their Google campaigns, their Facebook campaigns, their TikTok campaigns, their out of home linear streaming, all of that. Some of this stuff will be managed through the companies I work for. And therefore, it's very important for us to understand how all of this comes together, right? And it's not siloed. There are instances in which we will have, especially like I mentioned before, in some of those German publishers, they will have teams in-house running their campaigns. Our value add on this will be to validate their strategy or partner with them in defining the right KPIs based on the brand's goal. So yeah, I mean, if you're really maximizing what you're doing for an agency, you shouldn't just be like pushing buttons or activating a plan, and you should be working on that plan, partnering with the right ecosystem, and understanding the impact of your Google campaigns. How do you use those? How do you drive traffic back to the marketplace? Or how do you use the data from that marketplace to influence programmatic outside of marketplaces, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's the challenging thing for an agency, isn't it? Because they're so used to doing the planning, is that with a retailer in the retail media space, if you've got a brand, typically that's come from a trade relationship. And the accountability for success of that campaign within a trade relationship has to sit with the retailer. The brand is effectively saying that you know how to market, you know how to sell products. Here's our budget, look after it, you do the plan, and then to make that. And if you haven't sold X amount of incremental products, then we're not going to be very happy with you. And you're either not going to get the spend next year, or we're going to reduce it, or whatever it may be. The minute you remove that, and it's, obviously it's changing a little bit as consumer budgets come in and the metrics effectively soften, the KPIs move away from product sales and more into other sort of broader metrics. But still at the heart within retail, there's a requirement to sell product.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean? But actually, that's where I think around the piece around validation and checking it fits with wider strategy is important, because the brand still doesn't really want to take the accountability away from the retailer. But also the agency has a great value in seeing how that retail media piece fits within the broader consumer campaign, and at the top end of the funnel within the retail media piece, how that fits into the broader consumer campaign. Do you see what I mean? It feels like it's an accountability challenge.
I think there's a couple of things in that. First of all, you're absolutely right. I do think that there's been an evolution, right, of that. And what I mean by that is that we talked about that a lot at Jellyfish around what we will call sort of the digital maturity of the client. So you might have clients that might be focused on sales, and it will be very lower funnel. And those tend to actually just be, here's the budget that we have for trade marketing. And we have clients like this. This is the budget for the year. I need you to, based on what's happening on Amazon or on creator-enabled platforms, activate. Done, right? Like very simple, very siloed from that perspective. But then you start basically going through that, and it becomes more of a question, okay, I want to understand how I can reach mid-funnel, right? And use perhaps some version of display or programmatic investment to reach new audiences. Okay, that's a little bit more advanced. And then you have actually companies that we call multi-moment, multi-connected, where everything comes together in terms of, okay, well, we need to understand the impact of social into commerce. We need to understand the importance of SEO, of video, to drive engagement. And you mentioned going beyond what I would say ROAS, right? So it's not just return on advertising spend, but more about other KPIs. And that could be things like new to brand, lifetime value, that kind of thing. Not everybody's there. I mean, it takes a journey. We have a few clients that were multi-connected, and those were the ones where you're answering the question of what can Amazon do for my brand, or what can, Look Fantastic do for my brand, or Sephora or Kingfisher. And it's not just about how do I sell stuff. Now, let's be honest, it's retail, right? Everybody at the end of the day wants to sell. And this is where I think measurement is really cool, and things that are happening around cloud. Because 4 years ago, one of the biggest challenges that we had at Amazon was to basically get people excited about display and programmatic, especially with a platform like Amazon, because the answer will be, well, my clients, they just want to sell, right? Like, I don't care about, we have Google stuff to do this, but as soon as you start running marketing cloud, you're able to understand simple things like, what should be my search and display budget? What's the best combination to drive more sales? What is the impact of those display campaigns in my lower funnel? And then you get into things like, how should I think about multi-touch attribution? Or how should I think about frequency in terms of when is there wastage in the exposure I get through my display campaign? So the point is that it's very early days, but because Amazon has enabled that data, kind of going back to your question about data, now you're able to make those connections, right? And what we've seen in general is that you unlock more budget and more investment because clients are seeing the benefits and the incrementality of that spend. Or you spend more wisely, right? And they're very happy with that because you get a certain data set that you didn't have access before. So yes, I think as things evolve, what you're seeing is that more and more, and those e-commerce budgets will become even bigger in the next years. If I'm not mistaken, I think the UK is a 24 billion market right now in e-commerce. If I'm not mistaken, the CAGR is, I think it's 27%. And basically retail media has a big play on that. And the point is that those budgets will become part of the brand budget at some point, right? Like, that's the trend that we will see. So, and more and more CMOs will be very interested in understanding what's going on with that investment and how is that affecting my brand.
If I was a brand and I was working with retail, what are the measurement tools that you would recommend to me to be using in order to really see that across funnel?
Cloud measurement is important. It doesn't necessarily have to be Amazon Marketing Cloud, but obviously if you're using Amazon, yes, do we use that? But there's other solutions out there like LiveRamp, or Salesforce has some solutions as well. So some way, especially with, a cookieless world that's coming, and identity, I think that's super important. I think attribution models are interesting. It's complicated though, because everybody has their take on that, but being able to work with a good partner around that is important. But my recommendation is building blocks. It's like, you have to have your retail foundations right. By that, I mean, like, either have in-house experts or work with partners that basically understand retail well, that can guide you through sourcing models, the right KPIs for retail, sales velocity, just making sure that your catalog is humming, right? Like, you don't have to have everything in every single marketplace, but you need to understand what to have in which marketplace and what to have if you sell directly to consumers. You need to really understand that data, the distribution channels, all of that stuff. Last mile has to be humming before you even think about advertising. Then the advertising piece, I think ROAS is important. And obviously you always want to maximize your investment in terms of sales, but it's important also to capture new audiences, right? And to understand how you bring new eyeballs and new people, how you get them passionate about your products. Equally important is to ensure that those people remain loyal, right? So if you're a grocery player, right, work with those guys that have retail media networks, they understand their subscription data, their lifetime value data, repeat purchases, that kind of thing, because all of that feeds back into the brand. And then this idea of enabling a eloquent, connected experience for your consumers. So you have to ensure and you have to enforce that no matter what the interaction is between the different channels in Omnichannel, that you have the right tools to ensure that the experience is the same to the extent that can be. So if you're looking at an Amazon store, that presence is very similar to your .com in terms of the branding, the messaging, all of that. You don't want to have like a logo here that, 5 years old and a new one here, that kind of thing. If you think about what I mentioned before, connected stores, those digital displays that now you have at Tesco's, the QR codes, all of that stuff. Again, like just that reinforcement, right? Being able to measure that is super important online and offline. So having the right set of tools is super important. And most importantly, I think, because not everybody can build like an army of people to do this, is work with the right partner that not only provides the tools, but it's able to interpret and even apply the changes needed.
Yeah. Can you think of any sort of case study or any example of a brand that's really used omnichannel measurement to effectively really accelerate growth of product sales or brand awareness, depending on which KPI they were looking for?
Yeah, I think one that has done a tremendous job in this is L'Oreal, for sure. I mean, well, they haven't been a client of mine directly on retail media, but we've seen a lot of the work and the discussions that we've been having with Amazon in terms of how they work and all that. They're open to testing, they're open to measurement, they're open to see the value, and you just have to go through an Amazon.com case study file to see all the good stuff that has happened on that front. Diageo is another one. They were early adopters of display and they've seen a lot of benefit. They had a lot of cool things going on to drive engagement. So these are, in a way, brands of the future. I would say that really get that piece of understanding, that experience, that connectivity. At Jellyfish, we have started to work, or they had started to work a lot on that front as well with clients that were 360, right? So bringing that retail part connected. And I think sort of the tipping point is where people start using that retail data to influence the other channel. So
yes,
I think Danone is a great example of that as well. I was talking to someone who worked there and he was explaining to me how the center of what they're working on is the retail data, the commerce data. And that's very exciting, right? So it's,
really
it's not the afterthought, it's the central to the decision.
Yeah. Rather than planning top down with
exactly
using the bottom to plan up.
Exactly.
Very cool. Which is exactly how it should be. Brilliant. Luis, we're sort of getting towards the end, which is sad because I'm enjoying talking to you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So lastly, really probably with your commitment to sort of mentoring young professionals and empowering diverse talent, I touched on that in the intro. Tell us a bit more about that and what you're doing and what you've done there.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Guatemala in Central America. And when I moved to the US, as you probably know, in the United States, there's a large Hispanic population. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't have access necessarily to the tools that I had access growing up. So in terms of access to education, going to university, that kind of thing. So throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to be able to work in what we called, over there was basically minority associations, right? And one of the big ones that I worked for, or I partnered with actually, was called ALPA, which is the Association of Latinos for America. They used to be called the Association of Professional Latinos in Finance and Accounting, but I think someone helped them rebrand. But when I was in Microsoft, I was an active member of the chapter. We work a lot in doing recruitment. So we will hire people and bring them on programs basically to help them at the time, because believe it or not, I was a finance guy back in the day. So I had a whole background in finance. And what I did there was basically there was a finance rotation program. So bring them early on, minority focused, basically students that were graduating to rotate and basically become professionals in that area. When I was at Amazon, I work a lot with the associations as well on that specific area. I've done mentorship. I think it's super important. Like you will probably agree with this, Stuart, but sometimes you wish like the future version of you will tell you what to do or not to do at some point, right? So for me, it was in my university. I work a lot on that front. So I was a mentor for 10 years or plus with the undergrad program. Here in the UK, at Jellyfish, we had a Jellyfish sort of minority association. So I work a lot kind of encouraging, because Jellyfish is a global company. You have people from other areas of the world and just showing them, hey guys, because you're from Brazil or you're from this ethnic background doesn't mean that you cannot have access to these leadership roles and things like that. And these are great companies that encourage and give you that platform, right? And I will use my example of saying, like, listen, I've come to this level or professional experience, obviously because of me doing my hard work and growing my career, but also because I have companies that believe and supported me. And it was all about what I brought to the table. So it doesn't really matter where you're from, your ethnic background, all that. What matters is what you can do as a professional, as an individual. And I very much look forward to do this at EssenceMediacom as well.
Good. Well, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Congratulations for doing that, because it's so important, I think, to help bring people along and also help the diversity piece. And good luck with EssenceMediacom.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. It's definitely a new challenge. It will be UK focused, so I'll be transitioning back to a local role. There's so much stuff to do that I'm going to be equally busy as I've always been. So it's very exciting.
Great. Good. Well, if there's anything we can collaborate on, do let me know.
Absolutely.
Luis, thank you so much for gracing our Retail Media Moguls podcast. We've loved hearing from you. And as always, we're thrilled for you to come back at some point in the future. And maybe when you've got your feet under the desk at EssenceMediacom and we see how even another sort of 6 months of rapid evolution in retail media, maybe we can chat again and see how it's evolved, and especially that still exciting area of measurement and data and how that's being used to build bottom up from the funnel. But thank you so much for coming, and please do come again.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Luis. The Retail Media Moguls podcast is brought to you by Platform 195. To learn more about Platform 195 and how to connect retail media with intelligent marketing to accelerate growth, visit platform195.com. And then make sure to search for Retail Media Moguls in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Platform 195, thanks for listening.